Hey, I woke up with some big thoughts today. So I've come to the conclusion that every government is a theocracy, whether that's an Islamic theocracy, a Christian, a Jewish, or a theocracy dedicated to Baal or Moloch. Now, follow along. I want to be pretty brief here. So, in Islam, the word means submit. We can look at any one of the 65 or so Islamic countries and see this is the case. I was just talking with a woman on a dating website, and she's from Kazakhstan. She's converted to Christianity, and so I said, how common is that? And she said it's not common because it's illegal to do so. It's illegal to preach the gospel in Kazakhstan, and so is theocracy in Islam. In Judaism, the central god is, you could say Yahweh if you're looking at the Old Testament, but if you're looking at the Talmud, the god is the Jewish people. They believe themselves to be above all human races. They are the chosen people. I believe they have 5 points of light, and the rest of humans, the Goyim, only have 3 points of lights, and so technically all other humans besides Jews are closer to animals. And so then you have the Christian God, the Christian theocracy. Ironically, the Christian society, as far as all the ideologies I can think of, is the only one that leads to freedom. The central thesis, the central ideal to Christianity is Christ. Christ said, love your neighbor as yourself and love God with your whole heart, mind, and body. It's about self-sacrifice. It's about washing the feet. It's about being a servant. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. It's not about the centralization of wealth. And yes, of course, you can argue institutions grow corrupt no matter what ideology they practice. But if you're talking about who is the central ideal, if Christ is your central ideal, then no, the centralization of wealth is opposite to that message. So in Judaism, the centralization is the message. It's about making everyone, the goyim, a slave. There's excerpts in the Talmud that say, if a non-Jew falls into a hole, you don't have to give him a ladder. It promotes usury, and so in Dante's Inferno, he put sodomy and usury all in the ninth circle. They were together. Like, what does sodomy have to do with usury? Well, sodomy is a perversion of trying to make the sterile fertile. And likewise, sodomy is trying to make the sterile fertile. I might have said that wrong, but I think you got the idea. Taking money, which is a sterile item, and trying to make it fertile through this ever-increasing debt, ever-inflation of the money supply, is a recipe for financial collapse. And taking that which is meant to be fertile, the idea of creating new human life, the most beautiful gift that we have. Children give our life meaning. They give us a reason to plan and create just societies. We're just living for ourselves. We don't have that motivation. So when we start living for others, and especially our children, that great societies flourish. And so taking that which is fertile and making it sterile, like the anus is not a sexual organ. And so if money is your god, if the Jewish people, it's essentially it's an ethno state. Israel trying to form this Jewish ethno-state. So your theocracy is based off of money and power. And again, with Islam, it's about the centralization of power. Taqiyya, using lies to centralize more power to Islam. It's about going into a new culture and just having as many kids. I believe that's called the Hijra, is the date that Islam starts its calendar. So year one. In Christianity, year one is the birth of Christ, the Savior, the comer of peace, or the bringer of peace and joy and love and self-sacrifice. In Islam, year one is the Hijra. That's when Muhammad migrated and began spreading the faith by the sword. So it is a supremacist theocracy. Judaism is a supremacist theocracy. Christianity is also a supremacist theocracy. But again, the irony is that it's not spreading it by the sword. It's not spreading it by financial, overtaking or dominance. It's seeking to dominate through, again, self-sacrifice and love of neighbor and a message of God as a father. That is not as common as you would think. And if you look at our culture, how in the black community, for instance, it's gone from, even slavery itself could not kill the black American family. It took the welfare state. It took getting the father out of the home. So families went from 75% intact in the 40s and 50s. Black families were like quadrupling their wealth status or their numbers inside of the middle class. They were doing so well. And then, once we instituted the welfare state, it was like, I'm listening to a story from Mark Twain. It's a man comes to, is it Wembley or I forget, but it's basically about a guy who sees this beautiful town and comes and wants to corrupt it. And so that's what the welfare state did. It corrupted us by giving a free thing, whereas a family unit has been designed to sort of provide for itself and take care of its neighborhood. The welfare state replaces the father, and pretty soon the family dissolves. The children they lash out because there's no structure. The females, they lose structure as well. And so the government takes the place of the husband. We see this in schools. Now, instead of being fed by the family, the schools are doing these feeding programs. And so they take on the role of genitor. And if you confuse people even further about gender, well, then it doesn't matter whether there's a mother or there's a father or there's a state. So when you take Christ out of your theocracy and replace it with Baal or Moloch or these gods of self-pleasure and momentary gratification, that's why it's so important to get the LGBT people. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're gay, no one cares, okay? But if your main sense of identification is through your sin, which, yes, sodomy is a sin, if your main source of identification is the rainbow flag, your central theme is your sin, then you are manipulatable. And there's different ways you can identify. If you're really a full person, your main source of identification should be your central ideal, your God. Is your God Christ? Is your God philosophy? Is your God Yahweh? Is it your God Allah? Or is your God anal sex? And so whereas American society used to be dedicated as a Christian society, its strength was in its dedication to the family. Um, you know, Catholics and um, well, multiple forms of Christians were having really large families. Now our native population growth has it's been almost at zero for the past 60 years or so. We've replaced that natural growth, the growth of the family, with immigration. And yes, there's plenty of great immigrants that come to this country, but in the 60s we changed it from European immigration to South American and third world immigration. And that has had a drastic effect on our culture. Um, that's not to put all the blame on immigrants. Like, it takes um, a weak person to accept the change. And so Americans have been weak. We've been weak for the past 60 years. And we're seeing the fruits of that. So, our theocracy, is it a dedication to Moloch, to Baal, who is the god of momentary pleasure? We're sacrificing our own innocence, our own children on the altar of convenience. So we're using our infants, our unborn children, to harvest their cells for facial creams to put on celebrities' faces, for health products. Um, if it's just a clump of cells, how come we can gain so much money from them to produce these vaccines and medicines? You know, um, really taking away the value of the human person to just use them as chattel is no different than the slavery we fought, um, you know, in the 1800s. Bloodiest war in America, by the way. So, theocracies, every government is a theocracy. It just depends on what God you want to keep, or what is your highest ideal. And, it's Easter. Let's remember that atheism leads to cultural suicide. Judaism leads to the centralization of wealth and slavery to the Jewish people. Remember, they are the chosen people, and everybody else is goyim. According to the Talmud, God or Jesus is on fire, burning in excrement. They do not have respect for Christianity, and yes, you can find Jews who respect Christianity, um, but the Talmud is an evil book, and and if your theocracy is Islam, it's Sharia law, which means your women go in cloth bags, um, your gay people are thrown off of roofs, and um, there's blasphemy laws. So, and yes, every country has blasphemy laws. Um, in the United States today, ours just become the secular blasphemy laws of the holy LGBT, the holy intersectionality. Um, so, who do we want our God to be in this theocracy? There are different ideologies, but if there's one that creates a free and just society, it is Christianity. It is Christ. So, happy Easter. Some thoughts to consider. Hope you have a great day with your family. God bless.